Um, I'm the executive director. So I'm not sure how familiar you are with nonprofits, but the executive director is like a CEO that oversee all of our programs as well as the administrative side of the organization, which includes finance, development, HR, and board governance.
Awesome.
And then our organization is a 26-year-old nonprofit. We were founded by Jim Marshall and Oscar Reed for African American leaders in the north side of Minneapolis back in 1991 as a response to basically young people on the north side getting recruited to become involved in crime or who are getting victimized by crime or who are experiencing homelessness. Mm-hmm. And so the two of them, they were also big Vikings players. So when they retired from the NFL, they came back to North Minneapolis to basically volunteer to form the professional sports linkage, which we've now shortened our name to the Link with their blessing. And we provide services. We're still based in North Minneapolis. A lot of our programs are in North Minneapolis, but we provide services throughout the Twin Cities area. We have 3 areas of programs. One, juvenile justice alternative program. So we provide alternatives to youth between the ages of 10 and 21 from going into the juvenile justice system to come and work with our programs instead. And then we also, that's a very brief version, and then we also have a housing and homeless youth services division where we have 9 programs, housing programs for youth and young families experiencing homelessness, and then a street outreach and drop-in center program. And then we also have a safe harbor division of programs, which provides an emergency shelter, housing program, and supportive services for youth who have been sex trafficked between the ages of 12 and 24.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you talk more about that program with sex trafficking and how it helps the community?
Sure. So we're one of the many partners in the state of Minnesota's Safe Harbor, No Wrong Door response for sex trafficked youth. So the first thing we have is we have a program. We have a program called the West Metro Regional Navigator Program, and so we have a 24/7 on-call program for Hennepin, Scott, and Carver counties. So any youth that's found to be sex trafficked within those counties, they can call us, and then we'll either go out and meet with the young person on site, or talk to them over the phone and basically do a safety and needs assessment, get them connected in with whatever it is they need right away. If they're in a crisis, help them through that, and then after that, help them ongoing through mobile case management and advocacy, crisis intervention, all of that. Getting them connected in with emergency shelter and housing through our program or others in the community is a huge part of that role. And then, so that's kind of a first response. And I'll just say, a lot of times we get calls from law enforcement or child protection, sometimes in the middle of the night, and we're able to go out and work with the young people right away, which is great. We also have a specialized emergency shelter and housing program for sex trafficked youth. So the specialized emergency shelter provides 6 beds. They're actually individual rooms for youth between the ages of 12 and 17 who have been sex trafficked within the state of Minnesota or who are originally from Minnesota but have been sex trafficked to a different state. And we provide a lot of on-site supportive services. So we have on-site case management, a survivor mentor program, mental health therapy, chemical dependency counseling. We have an on-site school that's licensed by the Minnesota Department of Education that's in partnership with the Prior Lake School District that's on-site. And then we also have an aftercare program. So we have a staff that specifically works with each youth and helps them transition out of the program back into their community. Let's see. That's for youth. I forgot if I said this, but it's for youth who are between the ages of 12 and 17, and then also any gender identity. So most think something that makes our programs for trafficked youth a little bit unique is that we serve all gender identities, whereas many only serve girls or women. And then on the housing side, and you can stay in the shelter side up to 90 days unless we get a variance from state licensing, in which case they can stay longer, and sometimes that happens. I personally have been working with young people. I started out my career working with young people experiencing homelessness as a street outreach worker and case manager back in the late 90s. And back then what was happening was youth who were, and runaway and homeless youth are often targeted for sex trafficking if they weren't already recruited in by family members and things like that. They're just much more vulnerable, obviously, because they don't have a safe place to stay, a lot of other things, past abuse, etc. And so at that time when I was working with runaway and homeless youth, I just noticed that a lot of them were involved in the life being exploited or trafficked. And what was happening was that at that time and until 2011, when we passed Safe Harbor, youth who were sex trafficked were being accused and charged with crimes of prostitution and put into the juvenile detention centers, and then, in my experience, oftentimes released back to their traffickers or pimps who would show up and say they were their uncles or stepdads or whatnot. And so it was a very horrible cycle, right? And these youth were being victimized for somebody else's profit, but then treated like criminals by our systems. So I became involved just because there was myself and many of the youth I worked with, as well as other youth workers in the field, just felt like this was a huge social justice issue and a big problem. And a lot of the young people that were being affected were also African American and American Indian or LGBTQ. And so it was just not right, obviously the way that we were treating these young people. And so a lot of us came together to work towards trying to make systems better, laws better, and then started doing like some specialized street outreach for this population. That's how I kind of started, and then advocated to get laws changed along, like I said, with many other people. So it definitely wasn't just me. And then worked with Jeff Bauer, lobbyists, and other people to get Safe Harbor passed. Brought youth to testify. Have done that this year to the Capitol. And then I also was fortunate enough to get a Bush Fellowship in 2012, right after the law for Safe Harbor was passed. And so my fellowship was 2 years, and it was basically studying how other states had implemented their Safe Harbor Safe Harbor laws, and then also working with young people who have been trafficked to work on setting up a framework for our Minnesota no wrong door response for trafficked youth. So that's what my whole fellowship was on. And so that was incredible, and I learned a lot through that and was able to bring a lot back to Minnesota to help set up our no wrong door. And then my role now is just to continue to provide shelter, housing, and services for youth who have been sex trafficked. And I hire all of I should have said this about the link that makes us a little bit different, is that we're a youth and adult-led organization. So we have a traditional board of directors for our nonprofit, but we also have youth on that board. And then we also have 5 youth advisory boards that are made up of 8 to 12 youth with lived experience from whatever area they oversee. So it might be juvenile experience with the juvenile justice system, who have been victims of sex trafficking, or who have lived experience of homelessness. And then I hire them in these roles, and then they help oversee our organization, help us to develop all of our programs, including our shelter and housing program for sex trafficked youth called Pathways. And then they also help us interview and hire staff and monitor the programs ongoing. Sure. So the good thing is, even though we're still working at the legislature on passing Safe Harbor for all, which would raise the age. So right now, if you're under 18, you can't be prosecuted for prostitution offenses. But you're right, technically, that you still can if you're older than 18. But we're working on passing a Safe Harbor for all law that would basically no one could get charged for prostitution crimes anymore. But just the buyers and the traffickers would get charged. But then, in the meantime, what's really great is a lot of county attorneys' offices aren't charging 18 or older for prostitution. It kind of depends on the situation in the county attorney's office, but like Hennepin County's attorney's office, it's super rare that they would charge somebody over 18. most of the time they're not doing that anymore, and they're referring them to programs like ours or Pride or something like that. So that's really good. So even though the law hasn't changed statewide, county attorney's office still have the leeway on whether to charge or not, or in some cases, the U.S. attorney's office. So we definitely always advocate for these young people not to get charged, obviously. And then in addition to that, for 18 to 24-year-olds, we are able to, now we passed, so even though it's the age for the statute of charging for prostitution didn't change, we're able to get it changed for service provision through Safe Harbor. So 18 to 24-year-olds can get served by a regional navigator program, aftercare, mental health, chemical dependency, and we always serve 16 to 24 in our housing program. So we provide all the services to sex trafficked youth between the ages of 18 and 24 that we would under 18, except emergency shelter. We just have housing for them. I think like many of our partners in this work and other nonprofits, we do the same thing. We apply for government grants. We apply for private foundation and corporate grants. We try to, get individuals to donate to us. And then we have fundraising events. So we try to do everything we can to raise funding. It's a lot of work. Yeah, we have really close working relationships with certain law enforcement, unfortunately, I think it's getting better. Okay, that's what I should say. It's getting better, but we need more law enforcement officers that truly understand how to do these investigations and work with these young people. But there are some great people that do, and so in Minneapolis, we largely work with Sergeant Grant Schneider and Cheryl Schmidt, and they're both wonderful. I was working on one with Grant on Friday, 15-year-old. And so we work closely with the officers that are kind of designated to work with sex traffic cases. Does that make sense? And then oftentimes how we work with them is they'll refer youth to us and for services. And then on our end, if a youth comes into, because a lot of youth that have been in the life or sex trafficked are raised, oftentimes they're not wanting to work with law enforcement and don't trust law enforcement for good reasons. And sometimes they've even been perpetrated on by law enforcement, And so basically once they come to work with us, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes after they've been in a safe place for a while and build up trusting relationships with our staff or myself, then they're more willing to work with law enforcement. And so then we can kind of, we always allow the youth to be interviewed or to take part in investigations when they're ready on their timeline. But we definitely always provide that as an option. And oftentimes our staff will be there to help facilitate those meetings. Or, sometimes if the youth want us in on the interviews, we'll sit in on those. And then same with court systems. So we work with, it kind of depends on where the trafficker is getting charged. But we have worked with court cases in Scott, Ramsey, Hennepin, Wright, U.S. Attorney's Office, And so we'll help basically just the same thing. We would be there when they get interviewed by the court, go with them to testify, be with them through the whole process. Well, the good thing is we have a definition that we created in Minnesota, but sex trafficking is slightly different. So there's sexual exploitation and then sex trafficking. So sexual exploitation is basically exchanging a sexual act, so it could be sex, it could be a blowjob, whatever, for money or anything of value. So sometimes we'll see a homeless youth being sexually exploited for a place, like for rent or a place to stay, or for meeting other basic needs, or for actual money. And it's still sexual exploitation, even if it's one person and then the youth, right? Sex trafficking is when there's a trafficker or a pimp involved that's profiting off of that exchange. There's also youth who have run away from home multiple times, like 4 or more times within a year, is a red flag. Youth who are truant from school for long periods of time, youth that show up with a tattoo. Sometimes traffickers brand youth, not always, but sometimes. So show up with a tattoo that say like so-and-so's bitch, or a trafficker's have a name that the youth doesn't want to talk about, or barcode. A youth all of a sudden has a big change in behavior in terms of, all of a sudden they're showing up with different kinds of clothing, or they're posting ads on Backpage, things like that are all pretty red flags that they are involved in the life. Sure. So I think the biggest thing is that I think the biggest ways people in the general public can help is by, first of all, on a legislative effort, call their local elected officials or write to them and tell them they want them to support. We have 3 safe harbor bills going to the legislature right now, and I can follow up with you and get you the bill numbers through email.
Yeah, that would be great.
Calling and saying we want that, because that allocates more money to not just the Link, but Lifehouse in Duluth and Heartland Girls Unit in Benson and all of our partners across the state doing this work to try to serve more youth. I just said that, we're always full. Today we're full. And so, like on Friday when Grant called me about that 15-year-old, I had to say, I'm really sorry, but we're full. We have to figure something else out. And so in order to build our capacity to meet the need of these sex trafficked youth, we have to get more money from our legislature and the community and all of that. So that's one thing, is to actively support the legislation that's going through that'll help sex trafficked youth or adults. And then and that's pretty easy to do, to spend a few minutes writing or calling your legislator. The second thing would be, that seems super simple, but I think, parents, and I one too, obviously, I have a 3-year-old son, but anybody that has children really should be raising, and our son has spent so much time on this topic already, it's crazy, but, raising their children to know that it's not okay to traffic or buy another human being. I mean, we just have to change the narrative around that that's not okay. It's hurting somebody. It's not a victimless crime. And change the culture that way, I think, will be the biggest way. And then it seems simple, but it's very true. If we raise our children to know that it's not okay, that'll help, this next generation come up. And then the third thing is for individual people to donate to places like the Link, or to other places that have licensed shelter or housing programs for sex trafficked youth, or do in-kind donations, or like we've had churches do things for us, like organize a 5K that raises money for us and Breaking Free, or all of those types of things help a lot. The one thing I think that the public should not do is go out and try to rescue trafficking victims on their own when they aren't trained or attached to an organization that can provide services. There's a lot of, because it's become a hot topic, there's a lot of people that want to do that, but you have to have a level of experience and training and all of that. Similarly to me, I know nothing about Wall Street, right? So if I went into Wall Street, I would be a huge mess. I'd probably screw up everything, and not know what I would do what I was doing. And people who have never worked with sex trafficked youth or haven't been trained really should not do that unless they, are hired on and trained by an appropriate agency.
Yeah,
because otherwise it can put people in safety risk situations or, all kinds of stuff. They can definitely, a lot of people call me, on the cell phone that you just called, or text me, or we have our regional navigator, that 24/7 crisis response. That phone number is 612-232-5428. Someone answers it or calls back right away 24/7, because it's basically like our online hotline. Or our, hotline where somebody actually, the person answers, and will either come out and meet with the youth or work with the youth over the phone, depending on the situation. And you don't have to necessarily know. If you think, oh my gosh, this youth I know is hanging out with this much older guy, like in his 50s, and she's only 14. And I'm worried because all of a sudden she's showing up with a new cell phone and this and that, and seems really anxious about making sure to get in touch with this guy. You know, any of those kind of red flags, you can still just call the regional navigator line and just say, hey, I think this kid might be being exploited. Will you talk with him or her, meet with her? You know, so the person doesn't have to know for sure. You know, we can figure that out from our end because we have assessment tools and stuff like that. We're at a good time in our history where it's not perfect everywhere, but it's gotten so much better for these youth. And so we're on a good, we need to do a lot more, but it's so much better than it was, like I said, when I first started as a youth worker, when they were getting put in juvenile detention. So we're making good strides. Actually, I just want to warn you, it's actually not. I know some people in the media say that, but it's actually not.
Really?
Just so you know. Yeah.
That's good.
Just to save you from putting that. Yeah, it's actually not. Youth are most oftentimes recruited by family members that are also involved in the life somehow, or by their peers.
Oh, wow.
So other youth, So traffickers will get youth to recruit other youth for them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Which only,
and so that's usually not happening. I don't know where that started. It's like the Super Bowl myth, but
yeah, I've read it so many places.
Yeah,
in a lot of places.
Yeah, no, I've never worked. You know, in 18 years of working with trafficked youth, I've never worked with women that recruited at the Mall of America.
Yeah,
so
interesting.
Yeah, so you know, I know that message is out there by the news and stuff, but that's not true.
Yeah, only the more reason to educate our peers.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all.